Welcome. You are back with the Business Podcast with your host, Ryan Knight. Thank you for taking a break during your lunch hour. Again, I need to get lunch here so that we can have a actual business lunch. But more importantly, we have an awesome guest today. But for those that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Knight, one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. We work with entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage, really to figure out what stage their business is in and then help them create a strategy to grow their companies exponentially. And I'm an entrepreneur myself. I run a company called Detailing Nights. So we provide mobile waterless car cleaning. So we go to people's houses, their offices, clean their cars on the spot without using water and our plant-based, eco-friendly cleaning supplies. So as you know, we put together this podcast because I wanted to track my journey as I'm trying to hit my first million. We've gotten about halfway there in years past. So this year is the year to hit that $1 million mark. And we're doing that through licensing and expanding our business across Canada and into the US. And quick update, we are signing a license deal in Thunder Bay and also in Ajax. So stay tuned as we ink more deals. But as I'm on this journey, we have to tap into the resources that exist for our businesses. And as you know, ACBN is one of them. But I feel like this interview today is one of my bucket list check boxes because being able to talk to people that are able to help you get capital. And today our guest is Bryan Duarte from Black Tech Capital. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
And so just before we jump in, we like to do kind of icebreakers.
Okay.
So I want to see where you fall on, we do this or that. So I'm going to give you some options and then we'll see where you fall.
All right.
So do you prefer eating in or eating out?
Eating out.
Yeah? Okay, solid. Do you consider yourself a morning person or a night person?
Night person.
Okay, we share that. I'm definitely a night person. Do you prefer remote work or in person?
In person for sure.
Okay. Is there a reason why remote work hasn't taken over?
I mean, most of my work is remote, but I like people. I like being around people. I'm a people person. I mean, I tell this story all the time. Like when I went to my first in-person event, large event after the pandemic was over, and my wife called me, right? And it was an evening event. She goes, "You're drunk, right? You've had got to drink." I said, "I haven't touched a drop of alcohol."
Yeah.
I was just so excited being around all those people, feeding off that energy. And I knew for sure then I was a full-on extrovert.
And that's where the difference between networking in person and virtual can't be touched.
Exactly.
Oh, I don't know. Are you Apple or Android? Team Apple or Android?
From a phone perspective, I'm Team Android.
Okay.
But from a computer perspective, I'm Team Apple.
Really?
So I go, play both sides.
And so those that have been watching know I'm on the search for the best oxtail in the GTA, possibly in Canada.
Okay.
Do you know a good place to get oxtail and rice and peas?
So for oxtail, unfortunately, my favorite place closed.
Oh,
right?
what are we doing?
It was a mom and pop shop attached to a gas station at the corner of it was like 401 and Markham Road, right?
Okay.
And like they really made great oxtail, and then after they sold the business to someone else, and the oxtail went to another level, and then they sold
it got better.
It got better, and then they sold it again, and then it was. No, it was out,
So
right?
it is still there, but just not under the same.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I gave up, right?
Yeah,
I stopped going to that place a few years ago.
So there's a secondary.
So my
that we can
secondary
find?
is Scott's Restaurant on Avenue Road, right? Avenue Road, just south of the 401. They claim that their oxtail gravy is good enough to drink. It is.
Wow.
So-
Wait, is that Scott Hills?
Scott Hills, not Scott Hills.
Yes,
Scott
yes.
Hills, yeah.
So they are on our hit list.
Yeah, so
yes.
they're my number one right now. And then I'm so bad with names, but then there's a new restaurant that opened up in Unionville and Markham. They're a high-end restaurant, first black high-end restaurant I've been to. They have a different take on oxtail, so it's not your traditional, but that was really, really good as well, right?
Boy.
As you know, I sit on the board of the Black Business and Professional Association. That's where we had our Christmas dinner, you know. If you'd asked me this before, I would have had the name ready because I'm bad with names.
Hey,
but yeah,
we will definitely
Unionville,
find them.
I'll get you the name. You know, that's my secondary one.
Love
right
that.
now. Yeah.
And again, you mentioned that you're on the board of the BBPA. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, maybe some companies that you had run before, and then why did you decide to start Black Tech Capital?
So I always start the story with, I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 7, 8 years old, right? My father was an entrepreneur, or is an entrepreneur. My great-grandfather was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. So it falls in the family.
Nice.
You know, my first business was in selling golf balls. So I grew up in Flemington Park, going into Don River, collecting those
Nice.
golf balls, cleaning them up, selling them back on the golf course. And I still remember to this day. So you got to remember, I was 8, 9 years old. Jack Nicklaus Golden Beer, that was my prized possession because I could sell that for $1, right?
Wow, yes,
and then,
yes.
yeah, and I'd be able to go to the Science
yes.
Center back then. So I'm aging myself. You know, it was 50 cents for kids to get into the Science Center.
Yes.
But that's how I paid for the Science Center. That's how I paid for movies.
I love it.
So, you know, I always did an entrepreneurial journey. I had a traditional paper route. I had a business with
same
Regal.
here. That was my first.
That was
yeah.
my 3rd or 4th business, right?
And I think I was an employee actually, because
Okay.
I think we were at the Sun.
No, I was with Globe and Mail.
Oh,
Global Mail, and then if you did the Global Mail on Saturdays, that thing was so heavy, like it was like that thick.
Gotcha.
Back in, you know,
I was
back
with the
then.
Penny Saver.
Okay.
You're like Global Mail. I'm like Penny Saver.
I did Global Mail, you know,
Nice.
and then I also did this thing called Regal. So
Okay.
Regal catalogs. I would take these catalogs, take them to school. I'm grade 7, grade 8, so like 12, 13 years
Right.
old, or actually 11, 12 years old because I was 13 in high school, and took them around. People would take them home to their parents. They would fill out what they want. I would go
Gotcha.
take the bus to Regal, which was at the corner of Laird and Eglinton,
Okay.
fill it out at wholesale. I pay wholesale price, charge retail, and that was, so I was like an
Really?
independent contractor
Is
for
that
retail.
similar to like the Sears catalog, but this was like
This was-
you could actually go and get the products.
You go to
and
get the
sell it.
product, right? Yeah.
I had
So
never
Regal,
heard of Regal.
they still exist as a catalog for Christmas stuff.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
Well,
this
and
was back, you know. So again, this was back in the '80s, right?
that is wild. I gotta look that up.
Yeah, okay.
That's so interesting. So now you're progressing. You're entrepreneur. The blood is running.
So entrepreneur, you know, I went to university for engineering,
Gotcha.
right? At that point, I thought I wanted to be like an aeronautical engineer,
Okay.
right? So I was in engineering, I was in mechanical engineering, I was looking at aeronautical, and then when I found out I'd spend the first part of my career just designing like a nut or a bolt in a wing, I'm out, right?
A year.
Yeah, first year or two, you know, just design. I said no.
Wow.
I was you know, had a more creative bent than that to just
Yes.
do that part. You know, the myth of what it would be like to be an aeronautical engineer is not the reality.
Right.
So I was in university doing engineering, and the year I graduated was in the middle of a recession. Right.
Okay.
So I remember I'd applied for a job. I still had a vision of being in the aeronautical space. I'd applied for a job for ComDev, developing satellite systems, and it disappeared after Christmas time, right? And I was still humming and hawing, should I go be an entrepreneur? That's where my heart was driving me, or should I go into the corporate world?
Right.
And I was, as I said, I love that design. I love that part of engineering, that building part. And I was part of the team in our 4th year where we did a natural gas vehicle competition.
And this is still
This
in
in
school.
university,
Okay,
right? Did a
right.
natural gas vehicle competition, competed against 23 other universities, 3 Canadian, 20 U.S., down in Oklahoma, just south of Oklahoma City, Norman, Oklahoma, where the university is. And that was really what started my passion on the clean energy, the alternative energy. Now, natural gas we're moving away from that because of the GHG emissions from
And that's
natural gas.
in vehicles.
But this was natural gas in vehicles back then
Gotcha.
because it was cleaner than gasoline.
Right.
So I always had that drive towards the clean energy, the environment side, you know, from those days. And so after doing that, I was hired by, then it was Consumers Gas, now Enbridge.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So got into that field and was fortunate, you know, in a career, had, you know, an early big career building pipelines.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
25 years old, I was running a $20 million project crossing the Ottawa River.
What?
You know, so even though I was in a company,
heavy.
had that independence, right?
Right.
And I'll do a little bragging. I was the only people in the company that ever brought a project in on time and on budget.
Come on.
Yeah.
Metrolinks, Crosslinks, are you listening?
Yeah.
On time, on
on
budget?
time, on budget. Because when you work in a regulated industry under
Yes.
budget, you don't, you know, under budget's actually not good. Because
Okay.
if you're under budget, they don't get to earn money on it because they earn money on the assets they own.
Gotcha.
Over budget, they claw it back. So the ideal is on budget.
Yes, yes.
Only
And that's what's
person-
always promised.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is what our proposing is going to
Only person that had ever done this in probably about 20 years in the
Come
company,
on.
bringing in a major project like that in on budget,
That's amazing.
on time, got a trip to Barbados for 2 weeks out of it.
Solid.
Yeah. So they took care of me, right?
Yeah.
And from that, got expanded into Enbridge, created a startup.
Okay.
They got into the electricity business. So we got into electricity business. We wanted to do electrical in subdivisions.
Right.
That didn't work out. I won't go into all the details, but we got into smart metering. And so the smart reading you see in high rises today, all the specifications for contractors, for design and so on, anything in Ontario, I created most of those because
Come
I was
on.
the director of engineering for that. So that
And that was
my-
a startup that you're
That was a
running, though.
startup, but so I mean, blessed to have the mothership of Enbridge to foot it. So I wasn't
Gotcha.
at that point didn't have the traditional startup. You know, you're fighting for the money and so on. We were well funded, but
So they allowed you to spin off and create this new entity?
they created. It was a team of us.
Yeah.
You know, I was, as I said, the director of engineering in there, but we created this new entity in there.
Okay.
Created it and then they sold. I left there in 2007, but they sold that entity 2 years later to Enercare. Yeah, for a pretty sum of money. So yeah.
So now, with all that background, especially in the clean tech,
Yeah.
you decide now to venture into the VC venture capital space. What
Well,
brought that on?
yeah, I mean, ventured off, had a number of different businesses after
Yeah.
leaving Enbridge. First my company was metering support services, sold that a year into that business. Then typical entrepreneur journey, sold that, we merged with another company, downhill, right? Walked away from that business.
Oh, man,
I literally
yes.
went into a meeting, they fired all my staff, myself and my co-partner, we walked away, start again, right?
That's wild.
Hired back all my staff into a new business, gave them all shares in the new company, away we went. So, you know, I've had different entrepreneurial journeys. I've started different businesses, a couple of them successful, a couple of them not successful. You know,
Yes,
just being
yes.
honest.
Yeah.
That's the journey, right?
Do you find you learn more from the unsuccessful ones or from the successful ones?
Bit of both.
Yeah?
Bit of
Okay.
both, right?
There's
You know,
always
people say
learning.
there's always learning. If
Yeah.
you're not learning, you know, people say, yeah, you learn from your failures. Yeah, you remember them more,
yes.
but you learn from both,
Okay,
right?
yes.
And then from there, back in 2020, right, we was getting more back into the clean tech field, getting into sustainability. But I'd also started working with entrepreneurs through the Center for Social Innovation, their Climate Ventures group.
Excellent, yes.
So advising, mentoring entrepreneurs, and it really hit me that the part I enjoy is the building phase.
Okay.
I enjoy building up companies. And so I enjoyed that part, but then I also wanted to make a difference for companies coming along.
Okay.
Because I remember I was on my second company. We had a couple $1 million in revenue, $2-3 million we were doing in revenue. We had a staff of 7, and none of the banks would come to me. I was just looking for a small loan of $100,000. No bank would touch me.
Even at that level.
Even
they
that level,
still-
2 years into the business had it there. I had I hired an external person to write my business plan. So
So like, you're
all
on
the
point.
fundamentals
Right,
were
it's
in
like,
place.
Yes.
and still work.
Did they ever
right?
give you a reason? Were they just
No.
saying this industry or?
No,
They're
it's
just
nothing. I didn't get any reasons and BDC was the only one that would come to the table.
Okay.
And
Right. Hey, shout out to BDC.
BDC twice, right? I've
Look
gone
at
to
that.
BDC twice
Yes.
for, and they've provided loans. Unfortunate side, they're a much higher interest rate than the
Right.
banks,
Yes.
but they came to the table. So I said, I want to change that, right? I wanted to help, entrepreneurs that look like myself, look like you, right?
yes.
Black entrepreneurs, wanted to make a difference for them. And not knowing, I didn't know the venture capital world at that point,
Right.
didn't know what different options were out there. So those were the things I wanted to change. And I wanted to really help others, you know, make their dreams come true,
Yes.
right? Help them build and grow their businesses. And that's where it took a
being
pivot.
that
Yeah.
missing link that you saw as your journey, it's like if I had this piece, the
Right.
journey would have been a bit smooth. It's not going to be perfect, of course. There's ups
No.
and downs, but
If
the
I had
piece
the
is there.
mentors, if I had the
Yeah.
advisors, if I knew about the venture capital world, if I knew the different options, that was going to change things. So,
Makes sense.
so in 2021, I started the venture journey, right?
And so you're saying initially you didn't have venture experience.
None.
You're coming in cold.
It's coming in cold.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's that journey like? Putting it, formulating it.
It's an entrepreneur journey again, right?
Yes.
You know, I went through a program called VC Lab out of Palo Alto in the U.S.,
Gotcha.
where their mission is to grow 1,000 venture funds over the next 5 years. So now they're on to year 2,
Gotcha.
year 3, and starting to year 3, that are doing good.
Solid.
So not just a
Right.
venture
1,000
fund.
that are doing good.
1,000 to do good.
Okay.
That's the mission, right?
Right.
Not every venture fund coming out there will be that focused, but that is what they want to do.
Solid.
And so I went into that program. We were part of cohort 3, and that taught me all the fundamentals about building a venture fund, right?
Right, yes.
The different pieces, what's involved. And the program was VC Lab, and they're in our current venture fund as a venture partner. And as I say, they provide all the back-end support. So as a new fund manager, I don't make silly mistakes on the legal. I don't make
Right.
mistakes on the term papers. You know,
It's
when
like
you're
that mentoring, that guidance.
they're there as the
along
guidance
way.
and the
Yeah.
back office admin and support on the venture fund,
Solid.
right? But the front end, you know, where I'm mentoring companies, where I'm advising them, investing, finding the right companies to invest into, that's all on myself and my co-general partner.
And it's interesting that you still have guidance where I would look at you as a person that is mentoring me to say, when, no matter what stage you're in, you can always be helping somebody coming up behind you and also still getting support ahead of you.
Oh, always. I mean,
Right.
since going back into my first business, I went out and got myself a coach.
Right.
Like-
yes.
You know, there was always that guidance and mentoring, as you mentioned,
Right.
can always use. So I've always had a coach along the way, and usually a combination of coaches. I
Okay.
have a coach for the business side,
Right.
and then I have coaching on the personal side, because that's the difference. Like, so going now into different roles, and now into the venture role, your mindset has to be in a different place. You
Right.
have to be stepping up your game and playing a different level. And, you know, you can go back, you look at any basketball star, football star, there's
True.
always a coach, and they always have different coaches. You got your conditioning coach.
Right.
You've got your coach for, you know, to working your shot, your jump shot, say you're playing basketball, you know, your close-up game, your defense.
Right.
So it's the same thing in business.
I see that.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, with the venture fund, Black Tech Capital that you put together, what is the focus of the fund? I know most portfolios,
Right.
they kind of concentrate somewhere specific. So where do you concentrate?
So we are focused on Black and underrepresented founders in the clean tech space. So a
Okay.
very niche market, right? Don't need to explain to anyone the need for funding for Black entrepreneurs. They still get less than 1% of the funding. Now that we're going into a recession, whatever you call it, you know, it's been pulled back.
It's gonna
Where's
get
it pulled
tighter.
back? It's pulled back from Black entrepreneurs,
Exactly.
right? But we will look at other underrepresented groups, but that's our focus. And then the clean tech space, as I said, always had a little bit of a passion for that going back to university days.
Okay,
And
right.
and I didn't want to just be a check writer, right?
Okay.
I wanted to make a difference. I wanted in terms of helping those founders. I wanted to be able to connect them to my networks. I wanted to be able to guide them. And then for my investors, I want to make sure I'm investing in something that I can make a good return
Right.
on, and I know that space,
Makes
right?
sense.
I understand the clean tech space, and I say to people, follow the money. Where government's putting their money right
Very
now.
true.
The U.S. just put $369 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really a clean tech fund, right?
Really?
It's called Inflation Reduction Act just to
But a
smooth
lot
it
of the
out on
elements-
the political side and get the Republicans to sign off on it. But it's a clean tech bill,
Right.
right? The Canadian government is putting money into that,
Right.
you know, and so that is the clean tech space. It makes it a good investment because you get that government dollars to back up the private dollars that are going into it.
Because that whole conversation around climate change definitely heating up, getting a lot of attention. So now that the investments are going to be there, I think I saw in the Canadian budget at least billion dollars into clean tech. So now I'm curious, as you're working with entrepreneurs, what are you seeing are some of the pitfalls? Because you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. One thing that I realized that Arlen Hamilton, her fund, she came down and was at BPTN, the Black Business Professionals in Tech conference. The first time I ever got to meet her. And she said, you have to decline like 99% of the people that you talk to that are asking for money. So what are you seeing as you're talking to entrepreneurs about what they need to do better in order to get VC capital?
So to get VC capital, you've got to be in a tech business to begin with right now, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
your typical VC fund, now I know there are other ones out there, but your typical VC fund is going to be looking at a business that's tech or tech enabled, right?
Interesting.
It doesn't have to be all tech, but it needs to be tech enabled because that is what is going to scale to a large degree right now.
It allows
right?
for that exponential growth.
Exponential growth, right? The potential for exponential growth, right? I'm not a fund out there chasing unicorns. I don't believe in going, let me find the next unicorn because then you reject too many. But I'm looking for a business that can have that potential for exponential growth. And given the clean tech and the field I'm in, I'm looking for businesses that are willing to export, right?
Okay.
So a clean tech business,
Canada.
you cannot build that and grow that in Canada alone, right?
Gotcha.
So you at least have to be able to go south of the border into the U.S., but more likely on an international stage, right?
Yes.
And so some of the businesses I'm looking at right now, they're a Canadian-based business, but they're deployed in Nigeria, for example, right? So you've got that international reach. I'm looking at businesses in the U.S., but again, can they go around the world?
Yes. And then you mentioned some of the international events that you're being invited to. Any interesting ones coming up that you're going to be talking about clean tech and investing?
So there's an interesting one coming up in the middle of March in Switzerland, right? So for our venture fund, we were awarded, I think would be the right word. So they awarded 17 funds back in September last year as the top innovative funds for the future. And that's the World Economic Forum. So the World Economic Forum created a division called Uplink. And Uplink was promoting companies over the last 3 years that are there to do good in the world. And they put out these challenges, say a plastics challenge or an ocean challenge or growing trees. And they had been given these companies, selecting companies to be part of their network, and they connect them worldwide. Companies, again, making a difference. There's a company out of India that is recycling the waste, right, out of all the dumps and the landfills and turning it into desks, right? So companies of that nature, but they wanted to then start supporting the funds that are supporting these companies. And Black Tech Capital, we got nominated as, or not nominated, we got awarded as one of the 17 funds that they're considering top innovative funds for the future.
Excellent.
And that was
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
solid.
you. And being part of that network, they've invited a select few of us to this summit in Switzerland in the middle of March, saying the Villers Summit, and again, look into how best can we promote and support companies that are going to make a difference. So this is not just talking about it. This is not, okay, let's get this reduction by 2030 or this reduction by 2050. All theoretical, like somehow miraculously that on the, a decade on the 10s or in the 5s or something like that, we're going to hit this goal. No, but we are looking, how can we promote the companies that are actually doing things in a difference? I mean, our first company we invested into, they're looking to remove a gigaton of CO2 out of the atmosphere each year.
Gigaton?
A gigaton.
Was that 1,000?
It's a big number, right?
I've never heard that number.
Yeah,
that's insane.
A gigaton. And that's what that entrepreneur went out to do. So back to your previous question, that's where entrepreneurs need to be doing. What's the big problems can you be solving? What's the big challenges, right? Nothing against an entrepreneur that's got a business, whether it's a restaurant or hairdressing, they're doing great. They're supporting their families. But if you want to start talking in the venture world, you've got to be talking big to attract the attention of a venture fund. So Yeah.
And I'm curious, so as we wrap up, now entrepreneurs are going to be hearing about venture capital. They might be in the tech field. So what should an entrepreneur do to prepare themselves before they approach a venture capitalist? Because we all, hey, it's nice and sexy on Shark Tank and Dragon's Den,
Right.
but it's not for everybody. And you have to be prepared. And we see that on the show where
Yes.
people get roasted.
If you're not prepared. Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you encourage us to prepare ourselves before talking to you?
I'll talk for myself personally, and then I'll go generalities and then talk personally. So make sure the business is scalable, right?
Okay.
Understand your numbers. Understand the financials inside and out, right? Where you at today, where you plan to go, and how you plan to get there. I mean, you've got funds like ourselves investing in the early stage. The first company we invested, they're not going to be commercial till 2028.
Okay.
But they've got a solid plan.
Right.
They've got all the different manufacturers. They know who their customers are going to be. They've already sent samples to their customers for their product. So it's understanding how are you going to scale, where are you going to scale, what's your team like, and be coachable, right? So we go back, like personally, anyone that we're looking to invest with, we start working with them, mentoring them, coaching them. I want to know they're coachable. I want to know that how they're going to pivot, how the business is going to grow. And then I want them to want us to see that, to me, this is how we differentiate from other venture funds. This has to be a two-way street.
Makes sense.
You have to want me as an investor, not just for the check that we're going to write, but for our networks, how I can coach you, how I can direct your business. Because I've seen businesses out there, yeah, that looks like a great idea, but it's not a good fit for the two of us. I can't work with them or they can't work with me. Next, right?
Makes sense.
But
and so, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So as we usually wrap, I try to get action items that I could work on over the next 7 days. So what would be some homework that you would give me as I'm trying to expand and grow Detail Ignites that I can start working on right away?
So the things I would look at for you right away, you're doing a lot of the right things. So let me just start right there, right?
Yes.
You're doing a lot of the right things. I'm sure, and if you don't understand all your numbers, your financials, right? Where the numbers at? As you're projecting, you say you're going into Ajax, you're going up to Thunder Bay, I believe it was, right? Understand what each incremental piece is going to be adding to it. And then if you're going to look for investors into there, how do they make their money back out of that, right?
Okay, makes
you know,
sense,
as the business grows, yes, there's profit margin, but is there enough profit margin for the business? So understand your numbers. When you're looking for an investor, look for somebody that understands that space, right?
Makes sense,
Don't just approach any venture fund or any investor, right? If they're interested, great, talk to them. But look for ones that understand the space that can help you grow the business, right? Do they have the connections? Do they have connections to, say, other automotive places? Do they have connections to customers that are going to want to come in? So, you know, do your homework, right?
I appreciate that.
And find a great coach.
Hey, I was going to ask you to be our coach. But again, I really appreciate you being here. One thing that we're adding new is to thank you for being on the show. As you know, Ebony Occasions is one of the sponsors of our show. So to Bryan, it was a pleasure having you on the Business Lunch podcast. You are an inspiration to me and the Black business community. I want to just say thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
And we'll see you next week as we continue the journey of Detail Ignites expansion. But this homework is not just for me. It is also for you too. Know your numbers. Make sure that when you are looking for capital, you can show how it's going to scale and how that investor is going to get their money back. And hey, we'll see you next time on the Business Lunch podcast with Ryan Knight.